Hey everybody, my name is Aaron Howard. For those that don't know me, Chief Delivery Officer at Novacoast. In short, I oversee all of our services divisions in the organization. Super excited to be doing this today. It's very rare that I do a presentation around a vendor technology. Personally, I'm quite picky in vendors that I'm interested in, and culturally, Novacoast is as well. We will often run through labs with 30 or 40 vendors in a niche before we settle on who we're willing to sign paperwork with. So yeah, super excited to talk today about our co-managed security and what we're doing with Chronicle, and with Mike Willis as well. Mike, did I say that right? Willis?
You got it right. It's a tough last name, but you nailed it.
Perfect. All right. Well, let me just kind of tee Mike up, and then we'll hand it off to him, and come back to me at the end. Just very shortly, for those of you that are not already working with Novacoast in some capacity, or maybe in one capacity, not others, we are a 22-year-old company of just very niche security experts and identity experts. We have deep expertise in sort of dozens of silos in the industry, and as well as being known for those folks, we're also known for the development group, which augments those groomed over the years from top computer science schools. We have talent that works solely in the security industry, integrating various tools, and often what gets us into the most difficult and complex projects, which is where we like to live. And over the past several years, our managed services has been definitely an exponential growth space for us, where groups are needing this service that we provide, and we'll get into that later, what we're doing with Chronicle. But that's who we are, spread across the U.S., the U.K., a little bit in LATAM. Specifically around Chronicle, I think the excitement around Chronicle can be summed up that, look, it's absolutely rare. It's a unicorn in our industry that a vendor comes around that will quite simply improve your security posture and has the promise of lowering costs. It just doesn't exist. And so I think that kind of sums up why we're here, why there's so much talk about Chronicle. But before we jump into Chronicle and the story and what it is and what it looks like, I think it's also important to understand where they fit, because anytime a vendor comes around, everyone wants to put it into one of those easy buckets. Is it SIEM? Is it EDR? Is it DLP? What is it? And Chronicle really doesn't neatly fit into one of those buckets. It's not quite a SIEM or it's not an EDR today as it stands. What it is, and what I can confidently say and stand behind, it is this massive cloud-based storage with Google search power that you can correlate security threat intel data, basically telemetry, and you can dig and find anything you're looking for. And it is incredibly powerful at doing that. So with that, very, very high level kind of insight into how we see Chronicle, Mike, I will hand it off to you to tell the real story and show us what the product looks like.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Aaron. I'm going to go ahead and take over the screen share here. So thank you so much for the introduction. So my name is Mike Willis, and I'm one of the technical leads on the Chronicle team. Now part of Google Cloud, which I'll kind of explain a little bit of our genesis. And I've been with the team almost a year now. So joined Chronicle actually before we launched our flagship product, Backstory, at RSA 2019. So I've been around as we've been building this product and bringing it to market. So it's been a really exciting time. And if we look back into the history of Chronicle and where we started, Chronicle's genesis actually is almost 10 years old at this point, which is kind of bizarre when you think about kind of technology life cycles, and did it really take 10 years to build a product? But the idea actually started way back when, during a famous cybersecurity incident Google faced, named the Aurora attack, which was a state-sponsored attack against Google. So at that time, the team was assembled to understand the scope of this incident, understand how could this happen, and was tasked by Larry and Sergey to say, all right, let's make sure this never, ever happens again. So as part of that, the threat group named TAG at Google sat down and wanted to understand how did this actor interact inside of Google's environment? What kind of breadcrumbs did they leave as they were kind of jumping from asset to asset? And the team kind of came to a determination that the set of tools that they were leveraging, so they did have log management, they did have a SIM tool, they had firewalls, kind of all the kind of traditional perimeter technologies, but that wasn't enough. So that team back then actually decided to take all of the security telemetry, so things like their DNS logs, their web proxy logs, their firewall logs, and pump those all into a massive data platform, which is what Google is known for, is having incredibly fast data platforms. So get all of that telemetry into a platform that could give instant access to it. What they had found is that as part of the Aurora attack, that the threat actor had sat inside of Google's environment for months, slowly kind of jumping around, knowing that organizations often lose visibility over time. So by getting all of these logs into a system where they were instantly available with no limitations as to how long they sit inside of there, they wanted to build a platform around this for being able to instantly investigate and then have the system constantly hunt for these bad actors on their behalf. So that was kind of the generation one, which is what Google built for itself, was this internal kind of cybersecurity analytics platform. So all was well and good. Google figured out how these actors had breached their environment. And then subsequently, some years later, back in 2016, some of the analysts from our threat intelligence team had actually been summoned to a government agency to review some more up-to-date threat actors that this government agency wanted to share with a majority of the kind of high-tech companies out there in the marketplace. So sitting around this table at one of these agencies, there was the threat intel team from Google, along with all of the other kind of major tech companies out there. And so the agency had essentially provided a list, and the list was kind of your typical IOCs, or indicators of compromise. So here's a set of domains and a set of IP addresses. And the agency said, oh, and by the way, this data is probably a little old, so you're going to actually have to investigate going back probably somewhere between 8 and 10 months back. So the analyst from Google flips open his laptop and logs into the internal cybersecurity analytics tool and pumps in those 20 IOCs. And in less than a minute, kind of raises his hand and says, nope, we've never seen those inside of Google. They're not anywhere inside of any of our systems. And everyone around the table was flabbergasted, right? Like most of the companies said, there's no way for us to get that data. It's way too old. Some of them were like, sure, that's on a tape somewhere in a mountain, and we'll have to dig it out to try to find that cybersecurity data. And then that's when the light bulb went off, was that Google now had a capability that most other organizations, even in the tech arena, did not have access to. So how can we start to take this and craft it and not just make it an internal tool, but actually bring this out to market? And that's kind of where our tagline, give good the advantage, right? Essentially externalizing this internal cybersecurity tool. So as part of that, it just so happens that Google has an incubation arm that's called, back then it was Google X, and it's now just called X, which is the Moonshot Factory. So the threat team at Google kind of pitched this as an idea to go into incubation at X. So back in 2016 going into 2017, the team started incubation on the product. So they kind of went internal, started mashing up a bunch of ideas, and going into essentially 2018 and then into 2019, started testing some ideas with some initial customers out there. So under the kind of new form of what Google and Alphabet looks like, we launched in 2019 essentially as an independent cybersecurity company named Chronicle. So Chronicle was an independent cybersecurity company, kind of sitting alongside Google and bringing to market our platform, which is known as Backstory, which gives that same advantage to enterprise customers to instantly analyze their cybersecurity data. And it was very exciting, midway through the year, that given the momentum of our product, that Google Cloud actually acquired Chronicle. So in midway through 2019, we actually joined the Google Cloud team, which essentially is meant to bring all of the wonderful, cloud-based technology Google has access to, bringing those to enterprises. And they want to do the same from a cybersecurity standpoint. So we were kind of an initial acquisition to launch this cybersecurity business unit, which is focused on bringing the best of Google to the enterprise cybersecurity space. And so Chronicle sits as part of Google Cloud with essentially the same mission, which is bring the incredible computing power and incredible speed of Google to the cybersecurity problem set. So our team was tasked with this problem, way back in 2009. And what we found is we went through incubation, and still, as we talk to a lot of customers today, those same issues we ran into back in 2009, we're still running into today, right? Which is traditionally a lot of organizations tackle these as like a log management problem, and that entire marketplace kind of works against itself. And the way that I say that is mostly from a pricing perspective, which is cybersecurity is about giving yourself maximum visibility across your enterprise, and not just today, but over time. Because as we've seen time and time again, it takes many months and sometimes years to sometimes detect these breaches. So as a team, you're often tasked for giving yourself extensive visibility, but the pricing models work against that, right? The more data you store, the more expensive the solution gets. So often organizations make sacrifices there and say, we're going to put this data type in, but not this other one. We talked to a customer that wasn't really interested in Backstory. They just made an investment in a brand new SIM technology. And so we said, oh, we understand you've already spent your money for this year. And it was interesting that as part of that SIM investment, they had actually also made an investment in an EDR technology. And they had already made the decision, and these were brand new purchases, that they were not going to put their EDR inside their SIM. It was too expensive to do that. Why would they ever even consider it? So that is what we saw as a continuous problem inside of this industry. So based upon the kind of pricing, customers are throwing away data. And then the other thing that we've seen is that a lot of organizations try to fix this with data lakes, which are meant to ingest massive quantities of data. But the problem is that it kind of gets slower over time. And so threat actors kind of know that you start to lose visibility as the data gets older and older and moves into like colder or slower storage. So why don't we think of all data as hot all the time, right? That the ability to instantly query that data and have it at your fingertips for investigations and threat hunting is the key of what a platform like this should deliver. So that is what we have architected with Backstory. And then, how do we make it quick for you to instantly kind of package through that data without having to sit down and craft individual queries? So that was another thing we wanted to tackle. And finally, right, there's a lot of this exists on-premise today. So how can we use the power of the cloud to kind of get teams out of this data management that they have to deal with and just focus on sending security logs to our platform and focusing on those threat hunting and investigation use cases? So how we solve this is really thinking about cybersecurity in petabytes. So bringing all of that relevant security telemetry. So whether that's traditional data types like your firewalls, your web proxies, or your DNS servers, all the way up into EDR-like technologies. So we've announced partnerships with organizations like Novacoast, so leveraging some of their existing partners that they have as well. So think of solutions like Carbon Black or Tanium for being able to ingest the massive amount of data that they're constantly generating. Built into the pricing is also 12 months of live hot data. So there is no cold storage here. And no longer do you have to kind of figure out like, 3 months, 6 months. We bundle directly into the price, 1 year of retention into the platform. This pricing is at a flat rate. So whether you send us a gigabyte a day or a terabyte a day, your pricing stays exactly the same. And then the system is not just a storage platform where you kind of dump your logs there and you go look at them when you eventually need to. That actually Backstory is going to constantly hunt across your cybersecurity data on your behalf. So we're constantly scanning all of the data you've ever sent us and looking for those indicators of compromise in there. So while you're hunting inside of Backstory, Backstory is also hunting on your behalf. And you'll see that as we walk through the demonstration. And then, the best at Google is often using our incredible computing infrastructure. So how do we essentially craft this? So yeah, it doesn't require a lot of heavy lifting for you to bring your data in. So if you partner with organizations like Novacoast, we essentially work directly with Novacoast on their MDR solutions to instantly bring all of that data into Backstory and then connect it with all of the other security telemetry in your organization, like your firewall, like your web proxy. And then you're going to see as we walk through the demonstration, which I'll pivot to here in a moment, we've really built the user experience focused on the threat hunting and investigative use cases. So as we walk through the interface, you're going to see it is not a log management platform where you're going in and like picking fields. We've actually crafted this for threat hunters and investigators to naturally navigate through this kind of massive quantity of cybersecurity data. And with that, I will pivot over and let's actually take Backstory for a test drive. So as I highlighted earlier, Backstory is a cloud-based platform meant for ingesting massive quantities of cybersecurity data. To work with the platform, we have a set of on-premise forwarders for ingesting kind of those traditional data types for things like your web proxies, your firewalls, your DNS servers. Those all exist on-premise, and we realize that. So we've actually created a set of forwarders, which you install on-premise for getting that data up into the Backstory platform. And then with our partnerships with organizations like Novacoast, we actually do direct connectivity with them. So it's as easy as saying to Novacoast, hey, we'd like to have your MDR data essentially inside of Backstory. And then we work on the back end to set up that plumbing to ingest all of that data directly into Backstory with no limitations. So you won't hear me bring up events per second, nor will you hear me bring up any limitations around the amount of data you can send into the platform. So the customers that get the most benefit out of Backstory are those customers sending us massive quantities of security telemetry. I deal with an organization right here in New York City, which has about 400,000 users leveraging an EDR platform. So a very large deployment of EDR. And every hour they send us about 500 gigabytes of EDR data. So Backstory really gave them the first platform in the industry to be able to ingest, first of all, that massive quantity of data and put it somewhere, and then make it useful by having Backstory constantly hunt across that data set. So it is really meant for the next generation of security tools that are out there that generate just massive, massive quantities of data and giving you a platform that is not limited around that at all. So as we can see here at the home screen, you can see the team obviously was I like to say born and raised at Google, because this looks very much like Google for your security telemetry. So we did want to craft the interface to make it very approachable. So everyone from a tier 1 analyst to the most in-depth threat hunter would feel at home inside of Backstory and not feel like that they have to go through and take many training courses to understand how to navigate their own data. So Backstory starts by bringing you to a home screen where you can instantly kind of search for those indicators of compromise. So imagine being that threat analyst from Google sitting in that conference room at an agency, and they essentially throw you, 7 different indicators and say, hunt for those inside of your environment. That's exactly what we're giving you with the search screen, which is the ability to instantly input things like a host name, a domain, IP, or URL. We also do now support file hashes inside of here as well, and allows you to instantly search across your environment. And in this instance, you can see here the bytes we've ingested are 326 terabytes. So keep that in mind that as I'm going through this platform, that is the corpus of data that we're working on for our organization. And that number could say 3 gigabytes, or it could say 3 petabytes. And the pricing for Backstory would be the same for my organization. And then also the performance would be exactly the same. So neither the pricing nor performance is tied to how much data that you put into the platform. So bring any and all relevant security telemetry into Backstory, and we'll show you how we're constantly making that useful. From here, I'm actually going to navigate up and take you to our Enterprise Insights page. On Enterprise Insights, As I said earlier, that initial search screen is you're searching for threat indicators inside of your environment. Enterprise Insights is Backstory hunting inside of your environment on your behalf. So what we're doing in this dashboard is surfacing any insights that we have where we've matched threat indicators against any of the existing data that you sent into our platform. So what you can see here on IOC domain matches are domains that have been flagged by threat feeds. So we partner with a few threat feed providers inside of our platform. So you can see things like the United States Department of Homeland Security, their AIS list. We bring in the ESET threat intelligence threat feed as well. So those come included inside of Backstory for no additional cost. And you can also plug in your own third-party threat feeds as well. So if you do things like have a solution like Anomaly, or you leverage open source tools like MISP, we can directly connect that threat intelligence into our platform as well, along with work with Novacoast and their team to use some of their custom curated threat intelligence and put that inside of the platform as well. And so what we have is kind of this natural marriage of data. We have this incredible fire hose of security data that's coming out of your organization, and it's just sending us, hundreds of gigabytes, if not terabytes of data every single day into our platform. We also have this fire hose of quote unquote the known bad in the world with threat intelligence. And what we're doing is naturally hunting between those two data sets. So I'll give a quick example here where you can see this is the known bad domain that showed up on a threat feed. So this sipapals.servehalflife.com was flagged as APT-like activity by the Department of Homeland Security. It was detected on a single asset. So we can actually see Todd Field's PC is an asset inside of our organization that was shown accessing that domain. The IOC is an older IOC, so we received it from the Department of Homeland Security about a year ago. But what's interesting is that we've actually first seen this threat indicator inside of this environment 9 months ago. So what we're doing with all of this data is as we ingest brand new threat indicators, within a matter of seconds, we're going to scan all of the data you've ever sent us. This is the value of having a platform like Backstory where data is hot all of the time. So when we ingest a brand new threat indicator, we can instantly scan that 326 terabytes and surface an insight in a matter of seconds, or send it over to an additional SOAR platform if you use those for notifications. We can surface that instantly and allow you to see anytime we've seen that threat indicator inside of your environment. So we can see this sipapals.servehalflife.com was first seen inside of our environment 9 months ago, and we last saw it 22 minutes ago. So whatever is causing this to emit inside of our environment, we're still seeing it today. So obviously from here, I now want to ask the question, well, why are we seeing this domain? So by clicking on the domain, it brings me into what we call our domain search view. And so what we just did is think of that kind of initial search box that you saw at the beginning. That same search box is now at the top of my screen. And what it did is it took that domain and instantly searched across that 326 terabytes of data to see, has anyone ever accessed that threat indicator? Just to show you, these aren't like pre-canned queries. Let's choose a not threat indicator, something like google.com. So when I hit enter, you can see that the domain is seen inside of my environment. And then when I hit enter again, it instantly tells me, yes, you have thousands of people inside of your environment going to google.com all the time. So you can see this 99 plus distinct assets. So we just instantly took that domain and scanned across your 326 terabytes and instantly surfaced, do we see that inside of your environment over the past year? Now imagine sitting in that conference room and getting one of these like day zero threat indicators. So it's a domain we've never heard of before. So let's go ahead and make up like a quick domain that we can imagine a state actor using. So I'll just make up this domain and quickly hit enter. And as you can see, in 1 second, it came back and says, nope, we do not see that data anywhere inside of the platform. So that is the speed at which now you can respond to indicators of compromise to say, don't just look at this going forward, which is what many platforms do, but also retroactively scan across all the data to understand, has this threat actor ever existed inside of our environment? That is the power and speed of Backstory to give you instant access to your data, no matter how old it is, and no matter the volume of that data. So again, you would get that same performance over many petabytes of data inside of Backstory as well. And what we do in our domain view is we sat down with investigators and understood, what are you often doing when you're looking at domains? You're running whois lookup. So we instantly bundle in whois data into the platform just to do basic domain reputation. We can also see, based upon your network activity, what IPs this resolved to, leveraging things like your firewall data or your DNS data. We also have things like VirusTotal Insights. So VirusTotal is part of the Google Cloud and Chronicle team. So we can actually see that there's things like communicating files inside of VT that leverage that domain. And as we already know that this was flagged by the Department of Homeland Security, though we could obviously take that and if there were additional threat feeds, we could drill into even further. But now we know that this domain is being accessed. It started back on February 22nd and last access on November 12th. So let's rewind back in time to February 22nd to understand, well, why did this user start to access the domain? So now we rewind back in time, and as you can see in less than a second, I've now brought back all of the event data back on February 22nd. So you can see I'm looking at February 22nd in a 10-minute window, and that brought back 200 events. As an investigator, I prefer to see more context. So I'm actually going to zoom out on my data set. So you're going to see me, I'm just essentially naturally navigating with my mouse wheel. So I'm going to be greedy and actually request 12 hours of telemetry. And in about a second, it retrieved 14,000 events from Backstory. And these events could be things like EDR data, DNS data, web proxy data. All of that is being surfaced for this user. And we did things like automatically stitch the data. So we took that user's host name and matched it to an IP address. So all of that context was automatically done for us, which can often be difficult as part of an investigation, which is what user had what IP address at what time, and then give me all those logs. The system is automatically doing that on our behalf. And then what we surface down at the bottom here are these kind of knowledge cards, which show kind of instant intelligence based upon this user's activity. So we can see things like the user was accessing domains we had never seen in our organization before. This is exactly what threat actors do, is they generate domains you're not blocking. We also took all the file hashes and scanned them against VirusTotal, and we can see VirusTotal has detections for these as well, along with multiple hits on additional threat feeds as well. So already I'm getting a feeling that this user did lots of bad activity, as we can see inside of these knowledge cards. And then what we do is in our prevalence view is we take those 14,000 events and we compare them to all of the other events in your organization. So what we're looking for is outlier activity. What was this user doing back on February 22nd that we did not see on other assets inside of our organization at that time? And we build that into a visualization where along the bottom here, you can see what we call high prevalence activity, which is the user going out to google.com and to the domain controller and to all the things we regularly see inside of the environment all of the time, versus this very kind of prevalent outlier domain activity along the top here, where you can actually see a whole cluster of activity followed by what appears to be beaconing behavior. So with this visualization, we allow you to see that, yes, there is definitely outlier activity here. And then rather than trying to scroll through 14,000 events and figure out what I should be concerned about, we can actually use the power of Backstory to say, dismiss everything that is not outlier activity. So I'm just going to scroll our prevalence slider to, let's say, anything of prevalence 10 or lower, show me that outlier data. And we took 14,000 events and we just whittled them down to 40 events. So it allowed us to essentially take binoculars to this and instantly zoom in on that outlier activity. And now allows me to focus in on the set of outlier events that happened on this user's asset. And I'll start to describe the set of events here. I won't go through the full investigation, but to give you an idea of what we're doing here. So we can actually see, if you remember, we started our investigation by searching for this domain. But the first outlier activity we can see on this user's asset is that the user was inside their Chrome browser. They went to upinfo.biz and they downloaded ghost.exe. A lot of really incredible detail there. And where we got all of that detail is that this organization was just sending us a bunch of log files. So in this scenario, they're using Zscaler as their web proxy. So a web proxy is going to be able to give us this rich detail like the downloading of ghost.exe. They're using ExtraHop as their DNS provider, so we can actually see the DNS request and response directly in the logs. And they're using Carbon Black as their EDR provider. So Carbon Black is giving us all that rich data around the process that was actually accessing that domain at that time. So what you can see here is that we created a single unified event based upon 4 log files. So what we did is we actually saw that those 4 log files were all related to the same event. Every time a user goes out to a website, lots of systems inside of your environment will generate log files. Rather than sifting through all those log files, we do what we call deduplication and stitching to combine those together into single unified events that allows you to no longer have to focus on these raw logs, which can be a pain to pick through. You can actually now focus on this unified event view that now describes this story. It's where we get our name. It describes the story of this incident and what happened, which is the user was in their Chrome browser. They went and downloaded ghost.exe. We can then see the process started. So ghost.exe, the user started that application inside of their workstation. It then went out and downloaded an additional payload. It gained persistence by writing a file called notepad.exe and then writing that to the registry to start on boot up. Then from there, it's doing kind of additional payload downloads. So we can see that ghost.exe is reaching out again to Office Revision to get additional data. It looks like via this JavaScript file. And then if we continue to kind of scroll down here, you're going to then start to see this what's very obvious beaconing behavior, which is every 20 minutes or so, this ghost.exe is reaching out to that domain. It's possibly looking for an additional stage, so it's downloading additional payloads, or this could actually be leaking data. So every 20 minutes, it's constantly leaking data out. So we can see all of that rich context in this timeline. And keep in mind, all of this data is back from February 22nd. And in a matter of seconds, it was available to me as an investigator to go back in time and look and scope this. So now I can start to answer some questions. Why did this user become infected? We can see they downloaded a piece of malware and executed it on their computer. Is this user still affected? Absolutely. So we can see directly in those domain insights that the user is still accessing that domain today. If I wanted to be adventurous, I could continue to scroll on this timeline, and you're going to essentially see that beaconing behavior continue to stretch across my screen. And then I can also answer, is anyone else in my organization affected by this? And the answer to that is no. And the reason we know that is that this is stayed at prevalence 1. If this was an infection that started to spread in our organization, we would start to see over time that this bar would go down and to the right as it gained prevalence in my organization. So with Backstory, we were able to keep all of that relevant security telemetry for a full year hot. The system was constantly analyzing it against threat intelligence and allowed me as an investigator to instantly go in and query that data and pick through it to gain insights as to what was going on with this user at this time. And all of this that I've interacted with, we've enabled SOAR capabilities as well. So if you wanted to do exactly what I did, but thousands of times an hour via an automation platform, we've enabled that with Backstory as well, allowing you to essentially unlock that all of the insights in that data and never penalizing you for the more data that you're putting inside the platform. So that was a kind of brief introduction and demo to the capabilities of Backstory and what we're bringing to market. It's been a very exciting time, especially with partnerships like Novacoast, where they see the value in data like EDR data with our MDR offering, and being able to bring that and join that together and naturally marry it with the rest of your security telemetry. And then saying, like, let's flip this industry on its head and not talk about data volumes and not talk about, oh, things get slower in hot storage and cold storage. Like, that is a fundamentally broken premise, and we need to think about security data differently to give ourselves and our partners and enterprise organizations the ability to instantly analyze data. Because all it takes is a threat actor, sitting inside an environment for a little bit, and we all lose visibility over time. So we're very excited to bring Backstory onto the marketplace, and looking forward to working with customers and partners to try this out inside of their environments. With that, I'll turn it back over to Aaron.
So one of the things that you mentioned about cold storage that I thought was, excuse me, it was very interesting. It's like, in short, if your organization has a ton of cold storage and you just replace the cold storage and provided the tool to the IR team or the SOC level 3, there's probably a business case there, which may even save money to provide this high-speed searching. And that's just grazing the surface of what we can do. I want to briefly kind of talk about what Novacoast is doing with Chronicle and how we're adding it to our co-managed services and sort of where we see the value add, because it goes way beyond that. If we take an EDR tool set, and many of these EDR tool sets are good on the endpoint at creating alerts and correlating those with different threat feeds, and allowing us to do some hunting in those tools. Some of them are terrible at storage itself, and they never really go back in time. So there's some innate problems with those tools. But if we take those tool sets that we use for hunting and we add Chronicle, now we have the full picture, because we have the endpoint where a lot of our attacks originate, and we have the rest of the organization, which we can dig through, and we can really find that complete trail of what happened in the attack. Novacoast culturally in our co-managed model, we want to integrate with everything in our customers' organizations. So oftentimes in this scenario, we're integrating these kind of hunts, these kind of alerts directly into an organization's ServiceNow or Jira, and building out models that allow this data to get to the right people at the right time. So that there's a full life cycle from an indicator of a compromise all the way through a remediation event. The types of activities that we're doing today, really on the detection and the remediation side, you saw in Mike's presentation. So, we're investigating IOC alerts, either coming from the EDR tools or coming from that correlation, that telemetry correlation that Chronicle provides. We're actively hunting threats. So our threat intel people that are looking for what's hot in what attacks are hot in different spaces and different industries every day are actively going and checking our environments for those. We're adding and creating those alerts in the ADR tools. We're managing those alerts, cleaning them up, which can be kind of a daunting overhead to just keep that clean. And finally, one of the coolest value adds is, we're able to kind of really timeline out these trails of these phishing payloads. As these phishing payloads get deeper and deeper hidden in these emails, they're a valid link to a valid website, to a valid attachment with a link buried inside, and now we can completely hunt down that timeline.
And our business hours are 8:45 a.m. to 4:45.
Oh, somebody put us on the speaker. On the remediation side, simply kind of narrowing down that origin of source of the exploit is providing a lot of value. But then if we've got the right tools in place and we've got the right SOPs and we're marrying this all together, we can actually go ahead and isolate hosts, kill the processes, and remove malicious files. So it really is a nice complete circle, a nice complete solution to help round out a security strategy and find more bad things more often. Just kind of a quick note about our SOC facilities and us culturally. Sort of what every SOC does is 24/7 analysts. We do that out of 4 global SOCs: Santa Barbara, California; Ann Arbor, Michigan; Manchester, UK, and we have a LATAM one in Guatemala to serve that local market. If you're doing that as a SOC organization, if you're handling that analysis well, that's baseline what you have to do. For us, there's a couple things that we include that we think culturally is the right thing to do. You have to care and feed for the tooling. It's no point in having these technologies up if all the log sources aren't there, if they're not functioning properly. So we have to care and feed for them and monitor the health of those systems. Even more critically is that we don't measure our success on that analysis, on those SLAs. We measure our success on, are we moving the security posture forward? Are we adding use cases on a monthly basis? Whether that requires us to use our engineering resources, whether to use our dev resources to integrate, to automate, It's really critical that we keep up with the attack surface and provide that as a single shop, a single one-stop solution without having to, buy 100 projects a year to get it done. So culturally, that's super important to what we do. And when we engage with a set of tools like a SIM, a Chronicle, and EDR, and put it all together, it's a single solution, a single service that we offer. So I don't want to bore you anymore with that kind of stuff, but I would love to open it up for discussion. And if people don't have questions, I have some questions for Mike that might kick us off. Okay. So Mike, maybe I'll start. Maybe others will jump in. You can ask a question over chat or just jump in. Mike, you had mentioned the replacement of data leaks, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about that. Probably I think it was 5 years ago where we started seeing in our largest global enterprises huge investments in data lakes. Senior staff being hired. Huge investment in hardware, trying to use commoditized hardware to build these data lakes and try to basically build what you guys have productized and made so elegant and simple. Are you guys starting to see folks remove those data lakes in favor of Chronicle to simplify what they have?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that there's interest in our platform around the ability to instantly access data, which traditionally data lakes are very good at scanning data over the long term, but they are not good at actively scanning that data, looking inside of it. So with Backstory, we give a platform to kind of make that data useful over time. Right? Which means that even though that data is 9 months old or 10 months old, we're actually constantly still threat hunting inside of it for you. So I think for organizations that use data lakes to store their data, if they still want to make that data useful, absolutely, Backstory is a great solution inside of there. There are definitely longer term plays where organizations are storing things for compliance reasons. It probably is economically feasible to store things inside of Backstory for 7 years if you have compliance needs. But we actually do have solutions around that where we work with existing data lake solutions. So if a customer is using something like an S3 or something like that, we can essentially fasten to that and make security data constantly scanned for 1 year or 2 years. And then if you have compliance needs over time, which is where a data lake is very good at, keep it in cold storage. I only have it there in case the regulator comes in. There's still value in that, and we can work in concert in those architectures.
That's great, and just the ability to take the concept of a data lake and what it brings and move it to organizations that never would have been able to hire the amount of staff and the hardware to do it, and say now you guys can provide that functionality. The other thing that I think you guys are doing incredibly well at that it's rare to see is the way you're timelining out the behavior of the user as you guys are deploying in these environments. Are you seeing organizations response times dramatically increase by that ability to do that? Because what you guys are doing in that is the view of it is really unique. It's so fast for the user to do.
Yeah, that goes when we were working with the team, kind of pre-launch to understand how do people interact with their existing kind of log management platforms and how do they pick through the data. So absolutely, right, we focus this on those investigative and threat hunting use cases to make it very natural to navigate through the data. As you can imagine, as I was navigating through that, there was actually hundreds, if not thousands of queries going on in the back end. But because we're using kind of the power of the data analytics platform that Google runs on, it's easy for us to crunch through those data sources and really focus in on helping organizations find things like outlier activity. So part of our edict was to also very much commoditize this, right? So make it very easy for people to interact with their data. So all enterprises have to focus in on is sending us raw telemetry. Do not focus on parsing data. Do not focus on building indexers and normal, that is not work for the security function. Send us logs. We have the power of Google kind of work magic on top of that to build these curated views and build that outlier activity, right? We have millions of CPU cores we can throw at this problem that are just not available for most organizations. So this is where we think that the cloud can to greatly accelerate kind of the visibility across data over time.
Yeah, it makes sense. And the way you guys are able to do it, because of your firepower, is unique, where traditional SIMs aren't able to do that just because of the amount of compute. That it makes sense why you guys are so successful at it. And there's a question from Dan. Sorry, let me pull up that question again. Sorry, Dan. How much network bandwidth do you think a customer would need on average to send their network telemetry to Backstory?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it always depends on the type of data you're sending. So what we tend to find is that the most high volume data sources we work to try to streamline those as best as possible. So things like EDR tools, if you're using a cloud-based EDR, we have to have direct integrations there where you don't necessarily have to bring that data on-premise. On-premise, for large files, are great because they're just text files, so they're very easy to compress. For our forwarding, we'll actually do an 8-to-1 compression ratio. So essentially, think about like how much data you generate every day. You know, take 1/8 of that, and that's essentially the egress data you would be sending up into Backstory. So we get great compression just because of the kind of natural structure of what our cloud is. So very easy for us to compress. So we have not seen any customers to like upgrade bandwidth or to send us up data, but certainly it changes with each customer and understanding those data volumes or those key data sources. But this is where the value of using cloud-based tools like Carbon Black in the cloud, CrowdStrike, Cisco AMP, these are all cloud-based technologies, so you never pull that data on-premise. It's our cloud fastening to their cloud and just siphoning over, sometimes hundreds of gigabytes an hour to get that data into our platform. Great question, though. Very common ask.
Yeah. Thanks. There's a question from a Novacoast, or I'll respond, but maybe you can expand on it. What is the coexistence story with existing SIM investments? From the Novacoast view, the need for an insider SIM where we're creating use cases is absolutely still critical. Creating those alerts and correlations now, but there's lots of business cases to be made as to why adding Backstory to that, as we've discussed, from cold storage to hunting, to that is an easy line item in a security program budget, because it may actually save money and it clearly adds a ton of value. And we know that your guys' roadmap will. What we're hearing is that there may be some more additional SIM functionality. So over time, we can make the business case today that adds a ton of value, and over time we can see, does our security landscape change? Are you telling a different coexistence story, Mike?
No, that's exactly the same on our side. So today, SIMs are laterally, they have lots of functionality, right? So a SIM does things like log ingestion, rules, end user behavior analytics. Like there's lots of features, but what we found is that traditionally SIMs don't have a lot of data depth, right? Which is that problem of it's too expensive to store the data, it's computationally too expensive to process the data. So SIMs do a very good job at like ingestion point, running a bunch of rules and looking at that data set. So we have a very focused kind of coexistence strategy today, where it is the SIM is doing all that kind of lateral functionality up front, things like, customized rules, which we don't have built into the platform. And like allow your thing to do that over 7 or 14 days, right? Kind of isolate that cost. And then because of our cost-effective platform, then offloading that data into Backstory, where we're going to constantly hunt looking for indicators inside of that. And we've actually directly inside of our product built connectors, like a connector for Splunk. So it's a very easy way to kind of connect those two platforms together to get platform from your existing data from your existing into Backstory.
Right. Question from Mike. And Mike, I'll try and clarify this. Can I upload an IOC and search for it? Mike, you can absolutely search for hashes of any type. Are you talking about uploading like a payload specifically and exploding it, or just searching for hashes or IPs or? Yes to the actual payload itself. I don't believe so. I mean, we have other tools that we explode executables in. Mike, unless there's something I don't know about.
Nope, you're exactly right, and that's kind of where VirusTotal fits in. Now, VirusTotal is a public tool, so we say like be very aware of the data you're uploading. But VirusTotal essentially does that where it detonates files and sandboxes, and will also like extract indicators. So very much we are focused on indicator searching, so things like domains and IP addresses and sandboxes, which are often emitted after you detonate things inside of sandboxes. But we don't directly have like file upload capabilities inside of Backstory. That's exactly where we work with partners like Novacoast, or VirusTotal is available if you are willing for the payload to be out in the public. But there's lots of other kind of sandboxing technology.
Right. We leverage our internal ones as well as vendors and as well as VirusTotal. It kind of depends on the use case, right? Where it came from, what it looks like, that kind of thing. But good question. Thanks, Mike. One of the other things that I think is glossed over in the story, but is incredible value in the work that we do. So, in our traditional SIM environments, a threat intel feed comes in, it correlates with data coming in, I get an alert. But those IOCs, to automatically correlate them back in time and go back years is incredible value add in finding potential threats that you never would have even, let alone if you were hunting 24/7, it's just the bandwidth to possibly to automatically do that. It's pretty incredible. All right, you guys, I assume when you turn these on in environments, that those alerts start flying in POCs and new customers.
Yes, yeah, it's always very eye-opening when you unleash this essentially database of like known bad indicators across a massive data set. So it's always an exciting time. It can be very eye-opening as well. But it's also a good way to kind of demonstrate the speed of which you can do investigations, which means you can, essentially go through these indicators. I did that investigation in about 10 minutes as I was explaining everything. But we consistently see that, most investigations inside of our platform take anywhere between 3 and 4 minutes between picking through the data and correlating it. So even though you're seeing lots of alerts, that the speed of the platform allows you to kind of instantly investigate those rather than waiting hours or sometimes days to get that data back.
Yeah. There was a question about IoT, but actually he's asking about SCADA as well. I think SCADA is really interesting because, and other, kind of high value, semi-air gapped networks where you've got, a high target financial system, the ability to sort of passively pull all the logs from that system and then sort of hunt away from it without a heavy hand in that environment, and maintain that semi-air gap, because they're rarely totally air gapped, is pretty value add. We're actually working with a nuclear facility on that right now, and it's very eye-opening, like you said.
Yeah, we see some interesting use cases actually working with partners like Novacoast, where getting like a corpus of data. So, hey, we think there's an incident 7 months back or something like that. We have this corpus of air gap data. We want to feed it into Backstory to have it instantly scanned. So we can actually ingest old data as well. So if you do have this essentially corpus of, let's say, we want to take this 1 petabyte, feed it into Backstory and have it do its analysis and investigation, you can actually kind of bulk upload data in, and that data doesn't have to be from today. You can backfill older data as well. So that could be great for kind of investigative use cases. Older data that may not be necessarily easily available without bulk uploading it into the
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, those are the questions I had. And is anybody? We have 4 minutes left. I'm conscious of everyone's time. All right. Mike, thank you so much for doing this today. Really appreciate it. It's fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah, looking forward to working with everyone. Super excited to be out there in the industry and working with customers. So anyone interested, feel free to follow up via Novacoast, and we're excited to work with you.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Really appreciate your time today.